Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So last week I went over why I thought 2023 was the death of woke entertainment. And really what I meant by that was that people in their minds are no longer going to put up with woke entertainment. It's just not going to fly anymore. But at the same time, the companies, yeah, they're still going to try and push woke entertainment, your quote unquote progressive entertainment. Just like I gave the example of Mark Waid saying that they will not share the comic industry with other people, they would rather see it destroyed. Yeah, these companies are going to run things into the ground. And we have the great example of that right now. What has happened over the last week, people finally coming to the realization of who the woman is who has been tasked with directing the next Star Wars movie. Her name, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong, is Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, and I'm sure you've probably seen by now a couple of clips about her saying that it's finally time in 2024 to see Star Wars being taken over by women, and that it is her plan to make men uncomfortable. And while I'm certainly glad everyone is starting to recognize this and to some extent ridicule it, everyone seems to be going over one or two quotes from her, and that seems to be it. No one's really delving deeply into this woman's past and other things that she has said and done. So that's what I'm going to do. And really, through that, answer the questions, how and why in the world did this woman get tapped to direct the next Star Wars movie? But first, I just want to let everyone know that there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment. They are for my 3 graphic novels. If you want something that is pure entertainment, something that's not going to delve into all of the nonsense that I'm going to talk about today, but is there simply as escapism, fantasy, and fun for you, then you might want to click on the links in the description and go on over and take a look at some of my graphic novels. I have 2 superhero graphic novels, both of which can be ordered through the Valiant Heroes Indiegogo site, and I have a return to form for low fantasy, a sword and sorcery story in the vein of Conan called Crom the Destroyer. Again, link for that is in the description. You can order it at the Indiegogo page. These are stories about traditional, true heroism and focusing on the audience and what they want. And you're looking at some of the beautiful art for those graphic novels in the background, so if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, as I said, click on those links and go on over and take a look at some of my graphic novels. Maybe give yourself a late Christmas present since you were so nice to everyone else over Christmas. Time for you to get a present for yourself. Anyway, back to my topic. So what I'm going to do is go over a number of statements made by this individual from various sources because she likes to talk. There is a lot of stuff out there about her and about what she has said in the past. And by the way, I will do my best to give you in the background a little visual representation from the sources where I get these statements. So first of all, let's look at this new Star Wars movie and what it is supposed to be about. Well, it is supposed to be basically what people thought that the last Disney trilogy was going to start out being. It's going to be a new Jedi Order being created. But by who? Well, by Rey. She has become the master, and she is going to teach these apprentice Jedi and then create an entire new Jedi Order. Everyone, of course, thought, well, isn't that Luke's destiny? Wasn't that how the last 3 movies should have actually proceeded? Well, yes, but they couldn't have that. That was too much George Lucas's vision for the entire thing, which, quite honestly, I'll give you a quote to show you that they're moving straight away from that. So yes, they're taking what should be Luke's destiny, what should have been Luke's destiny, becoming the new master to an apprentice of an entire new Jedi Order, and giving the entire storyline to Rey. Why? Well, because it has to be a female-centered Jedi Order, of course, because in the new quote-unquote progressive mentality, men evil, women good. I've gone over that fact many times going into feminist literature about how quote-unquote progressivism borrows that idea, or really takes the root of that idea from feminism, that yes, men are evil, women are good. Therefore, if you're going to build anything in the future, it needs to be woman-centered. But that's just an aside. You can go back to many of my older videos about such a topic. Let's concentrate on this female director and how she's going to bring this all about. Now, first of all, is this woman, Sharmeen, is she incompetent? Is she someone that has absolutely no experience? Well, yes and no. She has a lot of experience. She has a lot of awards. But this experience and awards are for documentaries and documentary-style movies. The only connection with a drama-like story that she created was 2 episodes directing the Miss Marvel show. Oh, by the way, this has a lot of connections with the comic industry and a lot of the things that I've talked about in the past about the comic industry and especially the pushing of Miss Marvel as a character. So, as I said, she has a plethora of awards, including 2 Academy Awards and 5 Emmy Awards. Now, whether or not you think that the Academy Awards or the Emmy Awards mean anything right now, well, that's up to you. But at the very least, if you look at that CV, that's pretty impressive. And as I said, there are a list of other awards. I'll flash something up in the background to give you that list. Many of these, again, focus around what is basically the activism that creates the impetus for the reason why someone would direct the kind of documentaries that she does, which is more or less about the empowerment of women. Now, when I saw this list, I thought to myself of my old video about how, for the comic industry, they no longer concentrate on a currency of actual money, but a currency of awards, and therefore this woman must have got appointed to this position of directing the new Star Wars movie simply because of all of these awards, and she doesn't belong there. But that was a mistake on my part. As we delve more and more into her past, this became readily apparent to me, although I do still hold that position in general that, it doesn't matter about money anymore. You just look at how many awards someone has, and that will get them the job, even though it is not necessarily true in this case. It is simply a supporting factor in this case. So this woman did a TED Talk, and I'll give you just a few short statements from her from that TED Talk. In that TED Talk, she calls herself a troublemaker. She says, and I quote, "I always wanted my stories to jolt people, to shake them into having difficult conversations." She also made a statement saying, "Cinema has the power to force us to look at things differently." That, and I'm paraphrasing here, the stories she wanted to tell were driven by her anger, although she does use the word anger. The reason why she wants to tell the stories that she tells is because she has basically righteous indignation about some things that exist in the world. And then she says, and I quote, "Cinema can shape and mold society in a positive way." Now, I want to stop there just for a second. Those 2 last quotes I gave, that cinema has the power to force us to look at things differently, and cinema can shape and mold society in a positive way, harkens back in my mind to statements made by Sana Amanat, the person in operational control of Marvel Comics for about 10 years, the creator of Miss Marvel, when she said in an old interview that superheroes were for pushing positive ideas. This is the exact same mentality that Charmine here is talking about in the TED Talk. Instead of saying push positive ideas, she's saying force people to look at things differently. That's what cinema is for. And it is for a societal purpose, to shape and mold society. And, just by the way, when Charmine directed her 2 episodes of Miss Marvel, she worked very closely with who? Well, with Sana Amanat. She even makes such a statement about how closely the 2 of them worked in one of the other articles that I'll cover later on. So yes, they have the exact same mentality and are coming from the exact same place. There is also another quote from, I don't know where this is from, it's a random quote that they flashed up on the screen during one of the TED Talks about what Charmine has said in the past, and she is quoted as saying, "It is our duty to challenge the status quo." Now, I'll stop here and say, if she was to focus her attention on what she originally was doing, which was being an investigative reporter and then turning those investigative reports into documentaries, well then, yeah, all of that sounds good. She can have righteous indignation about an idea, about something that's happening in the world, and then write a story about it, make a documentary about it. She can make documentaries that challenge people. She can make documentaries that are supposed to prompt some sort of societal change, try to show people things that they haven't been exposed to yet. Sure, all of that's great if you're an investigative reporter, if you're someone who just does documentaries. But she's no longer doing that. She has moved from documentaries into drama, moved into this storytelling sphere. And in one of the interviews that I read, she said that was the natural progression of where she was going with her work. Now, if you've watched any of the videos about this woman, you might notice that they put up a tweet usually in the background that someone made about her, and she's standing in front of a World Economic Forum stage. Now, I wanted to know a little bit more about that. How in the world is she connected to the World Economic Forum? Well, I'm going to get into that, but I'll just give you a tiny little hint of it here. That picture is from the World Economic Forum's Davos 2017 meeting, which is the major meeting each year for the World Economic Forum. And while she was there, she participated in a couple of different conversations, which are recorded. But a few statements I want to pull out of one of those conversations, a conversation she had with a man called Karan Johar. She said she doesn't want people to be indifferent about her or her work. She wants them to either love her or hate her. She doesn't care which, because either will mean that she's making an impact on the world. Oh, and by the way, in that conversation she had, she said, when you can play the woman card, play the woman card. Literally, I watched this video from the World Economic Forum site itself. They have these things time-stamped in the interview, and it's time-stamped as play the woman card. What does she mean? Well, she says she will play both sides. She will get in men's faces and make them feel uncomfortable when she can, using her leverage of you can't do anything to me or it will make you look bad, while at the same time she will pretend to be a sweet and innocent little female if that is necessary for her to get her way. She will pretend to be such to, cut in line. Have people say, no, you go first. As she says, she will play both sides. And it is quite okay, she says, for women to play both sides, to basically be two-faced and hypocritical, use whatever is necessary in the moment to manipulate men in order for women to get their way. So, moving on to a couple of other articles that gave quotes from her. There was a Hollywood Reporter article about her directing of the Miss Marvel 2 episodes. And within that, there's just something very small I want to pull out. She talks about meeting with Kevin Feige, Marvel president, and Victoria Alonso, both of which are fairly bigwigs for Disney, for Marvel. And when she describes her meeting them, I thought it was very odd, because basically she was saying, or at the very least giving me the impression, that when she went to talk to these people, she wasn't going there with hat in hand. She wasn't going there to try to sell that she would be a good director. No, she seemed to be going there saying, maybe I'll direct this for you. I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. And I asked myself, how in the world does she speak with Kevin Feige and Victoria Alonso as if, at the very least, she was an equal, coming to them saying, yeah, maybe I'll do it. But just put a pin in that, and I'll get back to that when I tie this all together. But let's move on to an interview that she did with Screen Rant. This is the one where she said she worked hand in hand very hard with Sana Amanat, and this is where some of the comic connections come in. First of all, there was a statement by the interviewer which is certainly stretching the truth. She says, speaking of which, when Miss Marvel launched in the comic space, a lot of people walked into a comic book shop for the very first time just to get this comic, just to be introduced to this character. What does it mean, knowing that when a character makes the jump to the screen, even more fans come in that may not have otherwise watched a Marvel movie? So that is the question of the interviewer. And I will say again, stretching the truth just a bit there, I don't think hordes of people swarmed comic shops in order to get Miss Marvel when it first came out. But let's just take it at face value and say, sure, it did happen, that a lot of people were drawn into reading Marvel comics because of this character. They didn't stay. That's the point. The point that she skirts and doesn't even bring up. Sure, let's say that this is true, that a lot of people went to comic shops for the first time to get Miss Marvel. But even if that were true, they didn't stay. These people, these new fans that they brought supposedly into Marvel to read new comics, they didn't stay. How do I know that? Well, if you go back to the first of my channel, I did video after video pouring over the numbers of Marvel comics at the time, about 6 or 7 years ago. And at that time, which wasn't very far away from the first Miss Marvel series, I would go over cancellation numbers for various books. One of those was always Miss Marvel. It got canceled over and over again and rebooted over and over again. Why? Because it couldn't make it past the cancellation numbers, which were extremely low, by the way. Nearing the end of when we had good numbers to go off of and study these things, Miss Marvel would be canceled around the 6,000 copy mark. That is to say, this book put out by Disney, a giant, massive entertainment company all over the world, who runs Marvel. And again, Marvel, who was having massive success at the time with their movies. They couldn't sell more than 6,000 copies worldwide, not to customers, but just to comic shops of the Miss Marvel series per month, by the way. And when they hit that mark, And again, it started to drop over and over again as the years progressed. When I came into it, it was around 12,000 that I estimated the cancellation numbers were at, and then it dropped to about 6,000 by the time, again, we stopped having good information for this, but it kept on getting canceled over and over again because those are pathetic numbers, which means people weren't buying it. Comic shops weren't buying it because customers weren't buying it. And so even if there were hordes of people running into comic shops to buy comics for the first time when Ms. Marvel first came out, they did not stick around. We have positive evidence for this. And that's really the point. The first series did okay. The second series did a little less than okay. All the other series after that for Ms. Marvel did spectacularly poorly, and all of them kept on getting canceled over and over because of poor sales. So it didn't draw in a new audience that actually stayed. That's the point, that actually stayed. But enough of that. Let's look at Charmine's answer to this question. She says, I think that Ms. Marvel is bringing in millions of people who are getting introduced to the MCU because of Kamala. That is Kamala Khan, who is Ms. Marvel, by the way. She goes on and says, and I think that that is very special for Disney and Marvel to introduce the character that brings fans into the fandom. I think in telling the Kamala Khan story, Marvel is continuing in the footsteps of breaking the mold of who is a superhero and what it means to be a superhero. I think they opened the floodgates with Black Panther, but Ms. Marvel is, even more than Black Panther, a story rooted in a family, in a culture, in a religion, and in the family dynamics that you fall in love with. You want to try that food. You want to go to that wedding. You want to wear those textiles. I think they've done a wonderful job in giving us free rein when creating that world that we're introducing to the rest of the world. So the importance of this statement by her is the fact that she's trying to mirror what the interviewer said with the comics, that this character brought in a new kind of fandom for the first time to read comics for Marvel and Disney by having the character of Kamala Khan exist and have a book, and they're going to take that and translate it into the big screen. Again, she's talking about directing the Ms. Marvel series, which happened last year or came out last year, the episodes that she directed. And she's saying that she's going to bring in millions of people because they're going to be drawn to Kamala Khan, and people who would never actually watch anything from the MCU will be drawn into this fandom. New fans will be drawn into this fandom. Now let's deal with that just for a second. I just showed you that was not true, or at the very least, not true in a way that is going to bring in fans that are going to stick around for the comics, and we already now have evidence that that's not true for the MCU either. First of all, these Ms. Marvel shows, the entire thing, had the poorest reception of all Marvel MCU shows if you look at the audience numbers of people who watched it. Now, the people who actually liked it really liked it, but those people were very few in number, and we now have evidence besides that of the Marvels movie where nobody showed up for this movie. Nobody wanted to see this movie. It did spectacularly poorly. One of the three leads for it was Ms. Marvel. So we see that no, she didn't bring in millions and millions of new customers, even though that was her intent. And even if she did, it's probably going to mimic the exact same thing that happened with the comics, that, yeah, they're not going to stick around, even if they come. But that's her intent. You got to keep that in mind. Her intent is to bring in a new audience, millions of new fans. And these millions of new fans will be attracted by what? Will be attracted by the thing that I'm always concentrating on, the idea of hero, because she says they're breaking the mold of who is a superhero and what it means to be a superhero. And again, this is mimicking something that Sana Amanat, who she worked very closely, she says, with on this project, has expressed time and time again about the fact that superheroes, well, it's not about conflict or things like that it used to be about. Sure, those things will be shoved in there, but it's about family. It's about emotion. And that's what she's talking about here. This new kind of superhero, what it means to be a superhero, is centered around the family of Kamala Khan, the family dynamics. You fall in love with her family, and then you want to try that Pakistani food, or go to that Pakistani wedding, or wear those Pakistani clothes. That's what's going to draw people into the MCU. And that's her mentality, I'm sure, going into that's what's going to draw people into the new Star Wars movie. And why am I assuming that? Am I just making a blank statement based on my own opinion? Well, really, I'm just looking at what she has said. Because if we move on from that Screen Rant interview to another interview that she gave with the other people, actually 3 other women that worked on the Miss Marvel series, there was a interview with a site called Pearly Front Row. This panel was called Miss Marvel. It was done in 2022, but was released last year. It is from the Pearly Center for Media. It's up on YouTube, by the way. But a couple of things that I want to bring out of that interview. Number 1, in that panel interview, the interviewer actually gives a quote from Charmine from when she did another Pearly... No, I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's Pally, P-A-L-E-Y. How do you pronounce it? I don't know. When she did an interview with them from 2016. And the quote was this: "I make films that I hope will cause some sort of change and spark a conversation. That is what I've always aspired to do, and that does not change. It is what I will always continue to do." And the point of that is the interviewer is saying, that's what you said back in 2016 when you had nothing but documentaries that you were working on. Now you're moving into drama, into storytelling that is completely different. Is this still the same? And her answer is yes. And there's one little side note from this interview that I thought was completely hilarious to me. So in this panel interview, there was her, Charmine, the director. There was Sana Amanat, creator of Miss Marvel. She is one of the bigger producers on the show. You had another actor, which is one of the major actors in the show. I don't know who exactly she is. I didn't watch the show. And you had the main actress who plays Miss Marvel. I can't remember her name. Aman Vellani, I think. And then you had the interviewer who herself you could see was either Pakistani or Indian. But the funny thing is, within the last interview that I talked about and this one, they talk about how Pakistani culture is so great and how they needed to introduce the world to this Pakistani culture. That's part of the quote I gave from the last interview about how you should want to, because of Miss Marvel, being attracted by Miss Marvel, you want to go and watch this film. You want to go and eat that food, go to that wedding, wear those clothes from Pakistan. And as she says, creating this world that they're introducing to the rest of the world, which is Pakistan. They're saying all of these things, saying it's a great culture and all of this needs to be introduced to the rest of the world to show how great a culture there is in Pakistan. However, of these 4 women, 5 if you include the woman doing the actual interviewing of the panel, every one of them, either themselves or when they were children through their parents, left Pakistan and moved to North America. Some of them to Canada, some of them to America. Quite honestly, to me, that's unmitigated gall. To say, look at Pakistan, how great an example it is for the world. You should want to be a part of this culture when either you or your parents on your behalf when you were a little child fled from that culture in order to be in North America. It's just surreal, the disconnect these people have. Now let's move on to another interview she did in the Women of the World Summit for 2015. Now, I came across, as you've probably seen in other videos, a picture of this woman with Hillary Clinton, and I was wondering where it's from. Well, it's from the Women in the World Summit 2015, and you probably have seen clips from this summit before from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton gave an opening speech for this 2015 summit where she said the famous lines at the time that everyone brought up when she was trying to become president, where she said that deep-seated religious beliefs need to change. Religious people really took that as a poke in the eye. So that's where that picture of her and Hillary Clinton came from, although I only found very low-resolution ones, so I'm not going to put it up in the background. But in one of the panels where she was talking at this Women in the World Summit, which is the one that everybody is replaying over and over again, I think the interviewer at that time was Bill Maher. There was a panel of her, Meryl Streep, and another director, I think the woman who directed A Wrinkle in Time, that abysmal failure, by the way. Why? Because it was steeped in quote-unquote progressive politics. But Charmine at that time makes these statements. I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. You know, it is important to be able to look into the eyes of a man and say, I am here, and recognize that I am working to bring something that makes you uncomfortable. And it should make you uncomfortable because you need to change your attitude. And it's only when you're uncomfortable, when you're shifty, when you have to have difficult conversations that you will perhaps look at yourself in the mirror and not like the reflection and then say, maybe there's something wrong with the way I think, or maybe there is something wrong with the way I am, addressing this issue. So again, moving back to that feminist ideological statement that I covered at the first, where women good, men evil. Men have to recognize that they are wrong, that doing things the male way is wrong, that women are here now, women are in control now, women are poking men in the eye now, deliberately making them uncomfortable so that they change their attitude. Once again, I give you the future director of Star Wars. Now, before I get into the last long quote that I want to give you from her, which really ties this entire thing together because it's her responding to people's negative comments about what she's going to do with the Star Wars franchise, let's look, as I said, for just one moment about her connection to the World Economic Forum. Now, she was at the Davos Summit for 2017 at various panels there giving statements, but that wasn't only what she was doing there. She was actually the co-chair of the entire 2017 Davos Summit. That's how influential she is and how much connection she has to the World Economic Forum. She co-chaired the major meeting for the year of 2017 for the World Economic Forum. How did she get such a position? Well, she is one of what is known as the Young Global Leaders. She's part of the Young Global Leader community, and she won an award as part of that community called the Crystal Award. It's from the World Economic Forum. Now, I've tried to look up this award, and really I can't find out much about it. They just give you a list of who the people are that won it on the World Economic Forum site. They never actually define what it is and what it's about. Not that I could find anyways. And she is listed, I'll give this in the background, on the World Economic Forum site as an agenda setter. And from the site itself, again, it says about the Davos agenda, because again, she's an agenda setter for the Davos Summit, at the very least, for 2017. The World Economic Forum says, and I'll try to read most of this verbatim, but there are a few parts that I have to take their statements from each year and put them together. It says, the Davos Agenda is a pioneering mobilization of global leaders aimed at rebuilding trust to shape the principles, policies, and partnerships needed in the future. It concentrates on global programming dedicated to help leaders choose innovation and bold solutions to stem the problems of whatever year that they're in, because they give various statements about various problems for each year. And it includes, as they state, heads of state, chief executives, civil society leaders, and the global media. And of course, she's a part of the global media. But I just want to pull out a couple of things from those statements. Notice how it says that, first of all, they're doing this to rebuild trust with the world. Now, this statement comes out of the agendas set during the global health crisis because people were in droves fleeing away from mainstream media, and the World Economic Forum saw this, and so they set new agendas to rebuild this trust. I did an entire video about this, by the way. Talking about who? Talking about Omar Amanat and his connections to the World Economic Forum. Omar Amanat being the brother of Sana Amanat, the woman I mentioned earlier who ran Marvel for 10 years and worked with Charmin on Miss Marvel because she created Miss Marvel, and how she worked closely with her. But anyways, that older video, I talked about this exact thing, how the World Economic Forum was setting this agenda with media and with storytelling, not just, news media, not just documentaries, but actually telling stories so that they could rebuild this trust, because they found that people were no longer listening to them and their agenda. They were actually saying, no, I don't want to do that. This, by the way, is the World Economic Forum that said in the future, you will have nothing and be happy. So again, how are they going to build this trust? Well, they're going to do it through innovation and bold solutions that are incorporating all of these people, heads of state, chief executives, civil society leaders, and the global media. But those words are very telling. Innovation and bold solutions. This is the exact same thing that was stated by Bob Iger in the interviews with him that I've covered over the last couple of months. And again, he was and is now again the head of Disney, the owner of people like Star Wars. He's talking about Star Wars and how they had to be innovative within the storytelling, which is exactly the thing that Charmin is going to do with the new direction of Star Wars. Yes, the new direction of Star Wars. Again, I'll get into that quote in a minute. But let's just continue on with the World Economic Forum for just 1 second and delve into how this future director of Star Wars is not only connected to it, but again, as I said, co-ran one of the major summits for the World Economic Forum. Why did she get this position? Again, she was part of the Young Global Leaders. For a second, let's look at the list of, and this is just a very tiny part of the list of people who were part or are part of the Young Global Leaders program. Why? Well, again, as they said, they're delving into the storytelling realm needs to incorporate heads of state, chief executive officers, and civil society leaders, as well as the global media. So some of the list includes Vladimir Putin, Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin, Prime Minister of Belgium, Alexander De Croo, former Prime Minister of Georgia, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, former Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, and Tony Blair. Also, just a small portion of the media part. These would include people like George Stephanopoulos, Anderson Cooper, Van Jones, Andrew Ross Sorkin, Brett Stevens, Ian Bremmer, Maria Bartiromo, Sanjay Gupta, Lena Ween. The list goes on and on. There's also, by the way, an athlete component to this as well, which I won't even get into. And, by the way, on this list is our good old friend, the race baiter who came up with the idea of anti-racism, Ibram X. Kendi, and, of course, the future director of Star Wars. Charmin is definitely on the list. This is how she moved up the ranks in the World Economic Forum. Now, what is the Young Global Leaders program supposed to do? Well, again, quoting from the website of the World Economic Forum, they say, our goal is to create experiences for the next generation of leaders that enhance their skills, broaden their worldview, and lead to innovative solutions. Every young global leader has a story about helping another member in ways large and small. For over a decade, our foundation of trust and ethos of community of givers, not takers, has been passed down. Young global leaders help each other become higher performing leaders by sharing personal advice and professional mentoring. They volunteer their time and experience to each other as board members and advisors and facilitate high-value connections and introductions. When I read that, I quite honestly thought about the way that in the 1980s and 90s they portrayed, whether it's historically accurate or not, I don't know, but they portrayed the Freemasons, where a Freemason would work to help other Freemasons if they knew they were part of the in club. They would get them that job. They would make introductions for them. They would get them off if they got into trouble. These kinds of things. A not-so-secret society that helped each other and made sure if you're part of the in-group, you got the connections. You got the introduction. You got the job. And if you're in trouble, you got things covered up for you. That's what the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders sounds like to me. Again, as it states, they help each other facilitate high-value connections and introductions. So it would be my statement that how did this woman get to the position where, first of all, if you remember, she talked to Kevin Feige and Victoria Alonso as if she were an equal, as if she were to say, I don't know, maybe I'll do this. Why? Because she is their equal, or possibly their superior in the media realm. Why? Because of her connections to the World Economic Forum. Why? Because all of these connections from the Young Global Leader program that she was in and that she got awards from, which led her to being the co-chair of the major World Economic Forum Summit for 2017. Again, she has connections. So why do you think that she actually got tapped to write the Star Wars film? Well, most likely because somebody, her or somebody close to her or close to the associations that she has, said, let's get her to do a new Star Wars film. Why? Because again, innovative solutions, which again, Bob Iger's all on board with. Innovative solutions to do what? To get the world to trust the message once again. Why? Because, as she herself has said, cinema has the power to force people to look at things differently. Cinema can shape and mold society in a positive way. When she was making those exact statements, because those are exact quotes, she was just stating what they were doing at the World Economic Forum with their media department. By the way, I'll try to find that old video I did about Omar Amanat and the World Economic Forum and the media agenda that they have and stick that in the description. Now, before I move on to the last quote that ties a lot of this together, I just want to emphasize that this is just a small portion of the massive amount of statements that this woman has put out. I'm trying to whittle it down. But she has made a recent statement because people are starting to ridicule the fact that she has become the person who is going to direct the new Star Wars movie. And she has given this rather lengthy response, which is very telling in many ways. She said, and I quote, "I am not surprised by any level of pushback from a certain demographic that may feel frightened about how we are changing who is making and starring in these films. But I think it's an excellent move by Kathleen Kennedy and what Bob is allowed to do to really lead the woman in charge of a galaxy far, far away. It's pretty damn exciting to be working on this as a director. And I think to all the naysayers about our direction with expanding the adventures of Rey, they really need to keep quiet and tighten those lips because harsh words only spoil the fun for others. I think that's the one obstacle that we deal with in this community. It's that there are many fans who feel Star Wars belongs to them, but it really belongs to the creator and their vision of what they are able to deliver to the audience. And if it's accepted or denied universally, well, then we deal with that problem process then and cross that bridge. When it comes to it, I think it's an unfair world that we live in when you have a female director getting criticized for her work. But this is only making me push harder for what I want to establish in this ever-evolving universe that holds endless possibilities. I stand by my past statements that I believe it's time for a woman to really lead this franchise, both on the creative end and within the story. We have some great characters that I think will promote women properly with the help of Rey, and this really is going to be a new chapter that fans have never seen before. I believe feminism is very important, and Star Wars is a great outlet to explore that. Those that are opposed to that reality need to keep damaging opinions to themselves, because it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help loyal fans or the creators behind these projects, which is why we had to let go from George's vision to really chase something new and original that will hold a different tone. This is a story for women and by women, and I think everyone should accept that and come to terms with it. There have been plenty of male heroes in the Star Wars films that we feel it is time for a change. Completely. Kathy's direction with these new movies are going to be incredible, and I am truly honored to be working on the first one to release just in a short number of years from now. Rey and the new characters we will be touching on have so much potential, and it's refreshing to move from the Skywalker legacy to embrace a new beginning for our fans. Honestly, I think that says it all. But I will go over those statements just very briefly. First of all, you notice how she starts blaming the fans right away. That there is, as she says, a certain demographic that feel frightened about how they're going to make changes. But of course, she has the backing of Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger to do what she wants with this woman-led film. Again, she says that these naysayers need to keep quiet and tighten those lips because harsh words only spoil the fun. She says that this is one of the obstacles. She believes that many Star Wars fans think that Star Wars belongs to them. No, she says, it belongs to the creator. What creator? Well, not George Lucas. She says later on that, we had to move away from George Lucas's vision and create something new. Well, the creator that she's talking about is herself. She's saying, no, Star Wars doesn't belong to the fans. Star Wars belongs to me. I have control. I'm going to do what I want. And it's supremely funny that she goes on to say, well, if it's not accepted universally, if people deny it universally, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Not accepting the fact that it already has been rejected universally by the fans, and they're not dealing with it. Quite literally doing the opposite of that. But of course, those are not real fans. The people who don't like the direction that she has, they're not real fans. Because they're naysayers. They need to be quiet because they think it belongs to them. They don't. That makes them not real fans. And that's okay, because we can get rid of those people. Why? Because just like Miss Marvel, they're going to bring in millions of new fans. How? Well, by concentrating on feminism. And oh, by the way, when people are pushing back on her and her feminist agenda, she's going to, as she says, push harder for what I want to establish in this ever evolving universe that holds endless possibilities. And again, she says, I stand by my past statements. I believe that refers not to just her past statements about this, but her past statements that I covered about what she wants to do when telling stories. But again, she says feminism is the way forward, and Star Wars is an outlet for that feminism. That's when she says people who are opposed to this and their damaging opinions don't help anybody, and they don't help the creator, which is her, and people who are working with her, or loyal fans. Who are loyal fans? Well, again, true fans, loyal fans, are the ones that agree with her. But in her mind, the loyal fans back her and her attempt to, as she says, move away from George Lucas's vision and chase something new, original, as I said, and quote it from the World Economic Forum, something innovative, with, as she says, a different tone. And once again, I must compare this to the words of Bob Iger, the former and now again current leader of Disney, saying that he had to get rid of the people in Disney when he came in who reverenced the past of Disney. He said, no, that doesn't allow for what? That doesn't allow for innovation and moving forward. He had to literally, as he says, get rid of those people. He says there need to be a respect for the past of Disney, but not a reverence. You can't reverence it because that denies the ability to move forward into innovation and new ways of telling stories. That's the exact same thing that this woman is talking about here, while directing a movie which, again, Bob Iger said was one of the spearheads of this entire innovation, which is Star Wars, of course. But to move back to her statements, of course, the true fans support her, the loyal fans support her, and they will, as she says, embrace a new beginning for the fandom. Why? Because they need a new fandom. How? Well, they're going to bring in millions and millions of people. As I said, this is her mentality. They're going to bring in such a wave of new fans that are going to be attracted by the feminism. That, of course, will offset the loss of those people they don't want as fans anymore, the people who don't agree with the feminist agenda that she's going to put in the movies. Again, an agenda which she is one of the agenda setters for the Davos Summit, for the World Economic Forum, on the media front. Now, here's where I want to end with this entire thing. The tone of that large quote that I just gave is one of backpedaling. She's not going to backpedal to say anything that I said was wrong. I just need to clarify it so that you understand that you're wrong. And why would they put out such a statement like this? Why? Well, again, the whole point of what she's trying to do is to get people to trust the message again. But as I said in my last week video, people are done with the message. And the more she receives pushback, the more she is going to delve straight into all of these things that she wants to do and change this franchise in the way she wants to do. But again, here's the real silver lining in this entire thing. Now, I don't follow Star Wars certainly as much as a lot of people, but I have been informed that there are many Star Wars films that were slated for release that never got made, almost a dozen at this point. So I think we should see this backpedaling as a very positive step. Why? Because the internet is ridiculing her and Star Wars and Disney about this entire thing. And that's what we need to continue to do. This is the Snow White effect. The Snow White movie that was going to come out, which the internet soundly ridiculed, and so they had to do massive reshoots, and we're not even sure that the movie's going to come out at this point. That's what we need to do to this new Star Wars film. Because if she thinks she can push back against a Star Wars fandom to set her agenda, well, let me tell you, she doesn't know what pushback is. And so, I rarely do this, but I'm asking you to share this video or other videos like this so that everybody knows the exact thing that is going on with this franchise. So everybody knows that the only solution to any of this and the only thing that they should be doing as concerns this new Star Wars movie is to ridicule it into oblivion. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels, stories that are meant to be pure entertainment, where I listen to my audience and what they want and give them what they want. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on those links in the description or the pinned comment and go on over and order yourself a copy of one of my graphic novels today. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.